Hello, beautiful vegans. Welcome to Empowered Vegans, the show that inspires and empowers vegans to live their best lives. I'm Mariquita Solis, and each week I feature leading experts in the vegan and plant based world, sharing inspirational stories, practical tips, and empowering conversations. My mission is to support the vegan community in living a fulfilling, joyful life while making a positive impact on the world. As a transformational coach, I also offer coaching programs to help vegans navigate challenges and create a life that aligns with their values. So please welcome my guest today, mindfulness coach Michele Granberg. Welcome, Michele.
Hi, Mariquita. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I'm always excited to talk to you. Well, we have a lot in common, and so I always feel like you're very easy to talk to, and you're doing so much for the world. So
Well,
yeah,
I feel the same way about you.
thank you. I see Omar and Rebecca are here. BJ are here. And so if you're watching, and please give StreamYard permission to use your name. And if you're listening on the podcast, thanks for joining us. This is going to be a wonderful conversation because a lot of times, well, we're talking today about veganism as a spiritual practice. And sometimes spirituality is, I know it's what saves me as a vegan. So sometimes spirituality might be missing on the vegan journey, or is it missing? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, how it's all connected or maybe not connected. So if you have questions, if you would like to find out more, let us know. Hi, JJ. Thanks for watching us. Questions related to spirituality, maybe what you think God is, what's God to you. And these are all things that we're going to be talking about today. And we've got the expert here, like I said, Michele. So where are you joining us from, Michele?
I'm joining you from New Jersey, East
Wonderful.
Coast. Yeah.
I've never been to New Jersey. Well, I'm in Atlanta, and we've got all sorts of viewers watching from Australia, and we've got them watching from all over the world. So let us know where you're watching from, Omar. So, all right. So let's talk about veganism as a spiritual practice. What does that exactly mean to you, Michele?
Yeah. So for me personally, I don't really see a separation between my veganism, me as a vegan, and my relationship to spirituality, which is really they're really one and the same to me. My veganism is just an extension and an expression of my spirituality, and for our discussion today, it's a kind of loose definition of spirituality. It is whatever that is for you, but it certainly is what feels true. What resonates for you, what is your direct sense of spirituality, that felt sense that's more in here versus maybe religion, which is something offered to you, something you're invited to, something that is more so presented to you at some point. So our spiritual views can certainly include our religious views and overlap with that, or for some people it's beyond that or independent of that. So that's a little bit more where I come from, the non-religious sort of spiritual. I bet everybody kind of knew that, although to begin with, you know, anyway. And then, veganism, we always remind people, is not a diet. I'm sure you've said that a million times, but it always bears repeating, because then we are really closing the gap between spirituality and veganism when we say veganism is really a way of being. And that's a lot of what's a way of being in the world and a way of living in the world. So that's a lot of where spirituality informs us when we feel like we're really spiritual people, we're walking the walk and we're talking the talk. That's what we're aiming to do. And veganism is very much that as well. It's about alignment. For me, a lot of my spiritual life is about the challenge of not just being spiritual when I'm sitting and meditating or praying or thinking about spirituality, but the practice and the art and the mastery of living into our spirituality every day, all the time. It's never turned off. and being aware of that. And so being in alignment for me means that I try my best for my actions and my words to line up with my morals, my values, and my beliefs.
Yes, and I see that. I'm with you, and so many other vegans. Definitely, I love what you're saying, and I was thinking about that too. Well, walking the path this morning and really being in tune and just saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for this planet and this earth and the animals, and so then that's a big shift for me in my life. Well, I grew up Catholic, and for me, I always was struggled with that, but I think when I was able to reach out more and kind of embrace more than Catholic is when I really grew. So I think everybody, like you're saying, has to kind of find their own path, what works for them. So I'd love to hear about what you, as a child, were you part of any religion or church, or and how was that growing up? Were your parents religious?
Well, my parents were not very religious. My mother more so than my father, um, and to this day is very identified with Judaism. We're Jewish, and it means a lot to her. Being Jewish means like it's part of how she sees herself in the world. It's part of her self-image. It's part of her identity, and she relates to it very strongly. I think she does. A lot of it is keeping traditions for her. It's more about the traditions and the beliefs that Judaism offers, but I think she sees it as her connection to her own mother and her mother's mother, and the lineage of Jewishness that's been passed along. And I think for her, it's a way of honoring and keeping that alive. And so I know she would love to see me continue to do that. But for me, growing up Jewish was nice. And I have warm fuzzies about it. I have no bad feelings about it at all. But when I discovered when I discovered my own exploration path of spirituality, even more so, Judaism just didn't hold much for me. I didn't feel like it really was fulfilling, and I felt like it was too dogmatic. And so I like to keep the traditions with her, but my spiritual beliefs are way evolved than they ever were. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, there's a lot of, well, it's very linear almost in that aspect. Religions can be very linear, and I think it was more of more of a discovery that I liked about spirituality. It wasn't everything didn't have to be a certain way because I was in the Catholic Church. Everything's very organized, and I just remember kneeling up, get down, get up, which is beautiful, right? There's nothing wrong with that, and so I mean, I honor that. It just, it's just not where I want, it didn't resonate for me as much. But yes, I mean, like you said, your mother was very into her faith, and my parents were also Catholics. And so, yeah, and it was hard for them, kind of for me to go on my own journey and explore other religions. Like my dad did not like that. Not my mom. My mom was more open to things, but my dad was very like, this is the only way, you know. And that's fine. That's what he was taught, and of course, So we really didn't talk about things like that very much. But yes, being on a spiritual journey has really helped me. The stronger I am spiritually, the more I'm able to handle the traumas that come with being a vegan and knowing what's going on in the world. And I'm able to really center and pray for things that I can't control. If I can't, let's say if I'm struggling in some area, I don't feel alone. I feel like that the entity that's bigger than me, I could call God, I could call the universe, but I think that right now I call this beautiful entity love, this divine love, right? Which is God also, or whatever you want to say. But I think that divine love always protects me. And when I'm hurting from the animals, I can reach out to her and just feel that compassion and know that she's there and sending me love. And I can send myself love because I know that's what she wants to do. So that helps me being in tune with her, and that's who that is for me. So what would you call the spiritual being, or whatever you want to call it? What would you say about that, Michele?
Yeah, well, I use different words. I go back and forth between you. I don't use God because it feels like there's a lot of baggage associated with the word, but I tend to use either the word universe or the word source. Or maybe in my mind I think of just consciousness, which
Mm.
is just like bodiless awareness, bodiless intelligence, that the universe, that everything we know of, everything we know and don't know of is all, there's an interconnectedness, an interconnected aliveness. I'm trying to keep it like really broad, like, without speaking the language that we're taught, because we have a lot of taught language, and taught language always comes with preconceived assumptions. So when I broaden it into, there's nothing that isn't spiritual, and we're in this field that we all exist in, that's what really resonates for me. And I've picked up some of that language over time, different things I've read, but it really also is, I'm just speaking from my heart when I talk about this. So the language sort of comes from my own sort of heart language. And as we connect the dots between spirituality, veganism, and the animals, because veganism is about the animals, it's interesting to see that spirituality becomes it's a very human thing. Like when we're interacting with people in the world, they talk about their spirituality and what they do, the path and the practices, in their spiritual life. But animals don't get spoken of within that same conversation, or within the same consideration that we have, and I think we really don't, we want to bring animals into the dialogue, because if we believe there is some oneness and some sameness and some commonness and some interconnectedness, how could there not be at the broadest level? There's more, we're more sane and one than really we are different. And these bodies are, kind of like illusions, like there are these temporary, arbitrary places that we live in. But I think at the heart of most people's spiritual beliefs is that there is more to life than this physical dimension, or the physicality of life that we perceive with our five physical senses. Like that's the general agreement of what religion and spirituality is, that there's something else. Like we can't, maybe it's invisible, maybe it's not, we can't see it, we can't touch it, but maybe we can really feel it, and how can animals be, not part of that? If they're here, they must be part of that. They must, therefore, if I believe I am source, I am the universe, that's what I would say, not separate from, if I am that, they also have to be. It's like, it's almost like a metaphysical scientific fact that they are the same, that we have to be cut from the same cloth, because there's no other, this is it. This is the only game in town, is that we all are that. And so to help, people have disconnected from animals in general. There's a big, we live separately from them, and they're far away. Farm animals are far away and out of sight. So it's easy for us to buy into the idea that they don't exist, or that they are abstractions, or that they are commodities, or they're soulless. And of course, I have no proof of any of what I'm really saying, no proof, but I certainly imagine it resonates for people that not only, of course, animals have a soul, they have a spiritual nature. Yeah, well, yeah. And they're expressing that, and they have a spiritual purpose all their own, and they are the same, just different bodies, but in essence the same. If we want to really embrace that as not just a pretty, bumper sticker, that may mean we have to change our behaviors, because that means that we're hurting souls. We're commodifying and making souls suffer. And so there's a disconnect there, right? No judgment, because you know better, you do better. I could say so much, but does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yes, and so the people that have disconnected, how does that hurt them? Would you say?
Well, the people who are disconnected from the animals or their spirituality or
Well,
both.
let's go, or both. Let's do both. First, if you've disconnected from animals, I mean, what is that causing you? I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, if you're disconnected and living in this sort of unconscious state, um, it's like you're kind of going through life, just kind of going through the motions, a lot of it. And I think there's a connection between a deep spiritual life or the lack thereof and things like depression, anxiety, stress, you know, relationship issues. So it's very much affects us on a day-to-day basis. And then there's also the idea that if you're not promoting in all of your daily actions, if you're not choosing kindness, it's kind of either one or the other. You're choosing cruelty. You're choosing, maybe you don't realize it until right now hearing this, okay? But then you do, you're choosing to be complicit in that violence. Of course that affects you because on some level you know it. On some level your conscience bothers you. Um, and it just has you sort of feel out of alignment in that way. There's the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jainist tradition of ahimsa. And ahimsa basically means living the path of nonviolence without exceptions, like nonviolence without exceptions. So that's where a lot of people draw the line who believe themselves to be spiritual and or religious will say, but there's an exception, right? Killing of animals is necessary to wear them or to eat them or to make them into products that we need that in order to survive. And of course that's not true. And so what effect is that having on an individual basis? It's hard to measure, and on a collective basis, this normalized violence, which disconnects us from our core kindness and our core compassion and the best of who we can be as humans. I know that you interviewed, and I have too, Will Tuttle, Dr. Will Tuttle, and everybody should read his books, especially The World Peace Diet. And he talks a little bit, a lot in there about the sort of metaphysical nature of all of us and that everything is energy. Like our true spiritual nature is this non-physical essence, this non-physical energy. And when we partake, ingest the dead flesh, it's still energy. The most intimate thing we can do is eat. We're putting something from out here in our body and absorbing it. So again, there's no science necessarily to back this up, but I believe it is true that then on some level, a soul level, a cellular level, we are incorporating. And of course, death and pain and their screams and their resistance to this and pain and suffering in that way. And how does that show up? Maybe as good old sickness and illness. Certainly we can connect the dots to that. But again, anxiety, depression, and violence, even in our society. How can we do that and not have, there's got to be some consequence? It's just the laws of consequence, cause and effect, doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. When we disconnect, we're hurting ourselves. I mean, that callousness to our environment, to other living beings. It's very, very sad. Yes. And Heather's saying we take in that fear, despair. Yes. When we're
We do.
eating the sadness, there's no way to separate that. And that takes away our peace. And this idea that we're different from animals. And when you think of energy, we are, like you said, energy. We just happen to be in this form, right? And they happen to be in that form. And where is it that, who is it that's given us this right to trample on the universe? I was walking around the neighborhood and I saw um, just a little pesticide sign. And I thought, how are we to come into this yard and say, okay, well, now you all are the pests, right? And that is such a disconnection. It's a spiritual disconnection from, like you're saying, that everything, that there's nothing that's not spiritual, that everything is spiritual. And I didn't understand that for the longest time. I went to listen to Rob Bell's tour, and that's what he talks about. And I don't even know if he's vegan or not. I'm scared to know. You know, you're always like, I don't want to hear that they're not vegan, right? But anyway, everything is spiritual. And you just said that too. And could you talk a little bit about that? Because I didn't understand. I
About
mean, a few years ago, how I used to think, what do you mean everything is spiritual? But now I understand everything is spiritual.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, everything is spiritual. I don't know, you heard like that saying that's like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Well, we are taught that it's the other way around. We're human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are, you can't change the fact that we are spirit. We are that non-physical essence. And but I know it's like we have separated from the wholeness, but we haven't really, not really. It would seem that we're all coming into this experience of being separate in the illusion and the dream of being human, just to check it out and to see how we can improve upon it and evolve, you know, this experience. But it doesn't cancel out the fact, you know, just because we're having this human experience that seems very real, it seems very real, you know, it gives off a vibe of realness. That doesn't mean that we're not still this non-physical essence that is spirit, that is soul, that is already perfect. And it feels like the pendulum could have not swung any further from to imperfection to where we're literally doing things that it's not who we are. We're so far from who we are. We can do so much better, you know, and you know, where we're almost, you would think we hate animals. When people say I love animals, but your actions really are more along the lines of hating and loathing, right? So, you know, coming back away from that, I think maybe if we're going to have one sort of agreed upon spiritual practice, maybe it would be that golden rule. The golden rule. Like now we say it, but we don't hold true to it. We're taught as kids, our parents, most of the time, will teach us, do unto others. Do unto others as you would want to have done to you. You know, isn't that, you know, there's a reason that that truth still that's still spoken of today when it comes to animals. There's no exception there. And since we are all one, you're me, I'm you. We are mirror. This is a mirror all around us, reflecting back me. We're all, so what I do to you is really technically done to me, like immediately and as time unfolds, you know. And so, not that we want to use that like a punitive thing. It's not punitive. And we talk about karma, right, which is that cause and effect, that law, that natural law of cause and effect, right? Like it's literal. It's literal, since there really is no separation. So, all right, maybe it's going to start from a place of people being afraid to hurt animals. Okay, let's start there. You know, I don't want to hurt animals because it does ultimately hurt me. But even beyond that, why would we not treat animals, even if that wasn't the case, that it affects us, right? Still, being ethical human beings, being wanting to be humane to others, wanting to treat others, you know, the way we would teach our children to treat others, and holding ourselves to that ethics of reciprocity, you know, it's a big challenge for people. You would think it would just be easy, just go out in the world. But where people's blind spot is buying products, buying things they've always bought, and it seems to, in their mind, so innocent, you know, and so subtle, and so, you know, that I'm just buying this shampoo that was tested. You know, I'm just buying this piece of chocolate with a little bit of milk in it. But behind each of those acts is, unfortunately, and I hate to keep putting out the negative stuff, but it is the breeding into existence, the enslavement, and there's nothing humane that happens in these industries. Ultimately, the torture and open ultimately the killing of. So, um, so the golden rule, the golden rule.
The golden rule, yes. And so that's another thing that I think a lot of vegans feel frustrated about is when they go to spiritual centers, then they want to see vegans there. They're like, well, I don't want to use any kind of thing where anybody would say that I'm talking about them, but let's, the spiritual groups that I go to and we do the festivals or whatever, and here we are talking about all the earth, everything connected, and then then here come the hamburgers and hot dogs. It's like what's going on? And it's very hard to be, I'm sure like the only vegan there, and you want to say what's going on here, right? I mean, how do you handle those situations, Michele? And what can you say about that? I mean, what do you think about it? How can spiritual people, very spiritual people, talk about the connectiveness and yet not
They're not
understand?
making, they're not, that's what I say, the blind spot is huge. The conditioning is the indoctrination, the normalization of what we do to animals. I wasn't always vegan. I had a long period of time. I feel like I was born vegan, like we all are, but then you're told you eat this, but for me, going, like, the whole world is a trigger for me, for vegans in general, right? And so I know that as soon as I go out my door, like, or I go on the computer, even at home, there's going to be something that's going to trigger me because of all the ubiquitous cruelty to animals. It's apparent to us, you and I maybe, but not so apparent to others. And when I go to these fairs or festivals, spiritually based or holistic based, or a yoga center, or even my veterinary office, or wherever it may be, where you would really think that the folks who are animal caregivers, who are trying to grow spiritually or be more natural in their choices, would be vegan, and yet they're not. And so I just go to these things and I'm screaming in my head. I'm not going to scream at anybody, because that's not going to change anybody, to yell at them or to tell them they're wrong and point that out in some way. But in my head, I'm going, hypocrite, and I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. It's more a factual, that there are all of these blind spots. And, and again, maybe that's where we'll start to see some of the shifts. If we're going to say, where will the shifts be more likely to happen? Maybe it will be within those communities. Maybe one that I know you and I talked a little bit about, where I don't see it happening and you would think it would be the most natural thing. Well, I'm also thinking of like rescue organizations, dog and cat rescue organizations that will have barbecues and feed cows and pig. So, there are chickens to that disconnect, but it's also like animal communicators.
Mm-hmm.
So we could talk a little bit about, I could talk a little bit about that. And
Sure.
because I know that's another place that, not that it stuns me, but it makes me go, we got some room for some enlightening conversations there. When we talk about animal communicators, and we all communicate with the animals that live with us and the animals we see in the world, we just talk to them and we can just connect with them. And there's a certain amount of just sharing and getting in sync with animals. But animal communicators more so do it as a profession, and they believe themselves to be, or they claim to be sometimes, intuitive, that it's psychic, that it's a psychic ability that when they do it though, they are always saying they communicate with dogs, cats. Every once in a while, there's a horse. Somebody's communicating with a horse or a guinea pig or a parrot or something like that. I have never come across yet, and I'm out there in the world a lot in this, sphere of spirituality. I've never yet come across, and I'm sure they're out there, a vegan animal communicator or an animal communicator who communicates regularly with farm animals, and farm animals in every different type of situation. So whether it's just a small farm, or whether it's the animal agriculture industry, or in the slaughterhouse, and if they're authentically doing that, then they wouldn't be connecting with the animals. The animals are going, I'm okay, I'm fine, don't worry about me. This is all good. I'm doing this willingly. I'm just going to walk right into that gas chamber now. That's what the pigs. No, and if any animal communicator said that to me, I would question quite a lot. So animal communication is not a special ability given only to some, although our intuition is certainly something that we can develop, and it's very valuable to do that. But we can all communicate with animals. But if you've seen any of the footage, you don't need to be a psychic. It's undeniable if you've seen even a little bit of the footage, and there's a ton of footage out there. And I've seen more than I would ever. Nobody wants to see the footage, but we don't want to turn away. We need to know what they're going through in order to help and in order to change that. It's pretty obvious from their body language. It's the same as you and I in that situation. We'd be screaming. We'd be saying, F you, get me out of here, stop it, no, 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 resisting. They are thrashing and they are panicking and they are screaming. And that's their language. To say, because I've heard animal communicators sort of say that animals agree that on a soul level, pre-birth, that they agree to be food for us, that they come in knowing, and that they agree to be food, be clothing, be commodities. And I would say that they certainly do choose to come into this reality knowing full well, eyes wide open, the potential of what this reality holds for them. But there is absolutely, if you look at them, it's just no different than you and I. They are not agreeing to be bred into existence and to be enslaved and tortured the way that they are. So I think that animal communicators are often, and God bless them, because I think they'll just hopefully evolve. It's not unfiltered what they're saying. It's coming through their own, as we all talk mostly through who we are. It's not unfiltered. It's filtered and biased, but even more so for non-vegan animal communicators, because otherwise they'd have to hold themselves responsible and accountable, and they're just not at that place just yet to be able to do that. So I think it just becomes that sort of justification by saying animals are okay with it, or they know it, or we have to have food and they've come in knowing that they're food. I think that's the communicator projecting and anthropomorphizing. But please understand, I say this without any judgment. This is my observation. I could be wrong. Maybe other people observe this. And I say it because I want it to get better for the sake of the animals, for their experience.
No, I understand too. I know several, and I don't even know how to approach that sometimes. Like,
I know you can't always.
You have to be vegan, right? But it's like, how could that not be like a big thing for an animal communicator? Vegan. I know that the animals are suffering because they've communicated that to me. I can't wrap my head around it. So no, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, I think again, it's a huge blind spot that would seem, and yet it's not, because humans are humans. Humans, here we are, we're full of flaws, and we think we're doing really well overall. We tend to think, like, again, I wasn't always vegan. I was been like spiritual for a really longer than I've been vegan. So I was still in that sense of developing myself spiritually and understanding and really trying to feel into it but it still took me a while for it to dawn on me, but oh my God, but I'm eating animals and I'm contributing to that. And that there's that, again, that misalignment or that disconnect or that hypocrisy. But the good news is that's easily corrected. Hello, just stop today. Cease the harm. Step away from the harm. You don't have to harm. You don't have to participate in the harm. You can just stop the harming and then see what you might do next. Then you might want to help. First, stop harming. Ahimsa, nonviolence, the golden rule. I don't want to be part of that. I don't have to add to it. And I know that some people not will argue, but one of the biggest pushbacks with non-vegans is this the futility sort of argument. Like the in their minds, they feel like I'm only one person. What difference does it make if I go vegan? If I stop that, it's not stopping it. These systems are huge. But again, that's just another common misconception. First of all, what if a million people, a billion people are saying that same thing to themselves? What if they all stopped saying that and said, oh, I do make a difference? Now you're part of the solution. If you just stop saying that, we can start to build that critical mass that we know, you and I know, we were talking, will be the thing to shift this animal liberation movement to opening people's eyes and the best, opening their hearts, opening their compassion again.
Yeah, amen to that. And is there any group that you would say, I mean, that you think might be closer to the shift? Because like we've got the animal dog and cat rescues, but talking for them to them, they're still not very close. I just spoke to a worker at a shelter, and she's only vegan. So, is there any group that you might think is closer than another one?
Any like traditional, like religious groups or spiritual kind of groups that I see individual grassroots groups within some religions and within certain spiritual paths, but I think it's more an individual kind of way, not the larger group, because they're still caught up in the past. A lot of groups that have been existing for so long are still in the habit, even you think like Buddhism does not, as a religion, of course it's thousands of years old, embrace veganism. They sometimes embrace vegetarianism, but there's again a real blind spot about the dairy industry. There's a wonderful group, and again, it's just small groups trying to grow, but there's Dharma Voices for Animals. That's a Buddhist group. They talk about traditional Buddhist teachings, and their mission is to help change over the minds of Buddhists, monks, and help them implement veganism and understand why. Maybe they would do that. Otherwise, I am close friends with tons of vegans and tons of activists, and everybody is just all over the map in terms of other groups they may have been involved with and other what else they bring in terms of ideology. Our common ideology, it's not really a belief, it's a fact that we need to stop hurting animals. I mean, we are hurting them, and that's just not okay. That's just plain old right and wrong. If there's any plain old right and wrong, that's it, And so I don't know. I guess we, the animal rights movement, are full of flawed humans as well. Please, I don't want anybody to hold vegans to some unrealistic, like their perfect standard, and we're not. And even as spiritual beings, we're not. But let us aspire, to do better through keeping it simple and back to the basics.
Yeah, back to the basics, and what you're talking about really resonates, because we did have some monks come to our church, and there were a few that were vegan out of maybe 12, just a few. But I wanted to understand why only two, right? Why only two? And it's, yeah, again, I mean, I could just go on saying it's hard to wrap my head around it. It's just, but this is the culture. And hearing the evangelicals, there was an evangelical guy talking on the street last week at a festival, and we had a talk, and he said, well, God gave us animals to eat.
That's another one of those, how do you know that? Where did you hear that? Where, just because it's written somewhere doesn't mean it's true. Yeah, that's one of the default excuses. Yeah. Not true.
Yeah, I know, it's frustrating, but I listened to them actually, and then I presented them with a paper on the climate. Right? I mean, I felt like, and they said, well, we're going to, one of them, who was very all right to talk to, he said, well, we're going to burn in hell, or not burn in hell, but we're all going to die anyway. And I said, but yes, but did God want us to not take care of the planet before we go? Isn't this what God would want us to do? And he got very quiet, and he said, well, yeah, you're right. Yes, of course, that's the language they want to hear, which is fine, right? I mean, I just have to be very careful talking to people on where they are. But no, I felt like they did listen a little bit, but it's still that same old thing. Here's the Bible with all here's all the proof that animals are below us. They don't have souls, and we should be eating them, and we should have dominion over them, and all that. It's so frustrating, right?
It's very
And that would
frustrating.
be their spirituality. Yeah, yeah, that's their spirituality.
Sure, right. That's why we call it a belief system, because it's something you choose to believe. It's not right. It's not based on necessarily facts, but so, but I don't think that people necessarily always see it that way. That it's a belief system, meaning there's some arbitrariness to it. And if we connect the dots to more like the psychology, even that's like, the religion of eating animals. Like people believe it's part of their religion, it's part of their right to do that. But the psychology of eating animals, as well as, that human elitism and speciesism, again, that's so indoctrinated into our society that people never stop. They can't unplug. They can't unplug their thinking from that, since it's so reinforced everywhere, from commercials to billboards to absolute to the happy cows you see on the trucks. It's so ubiquitous and everywhere. But this human elitism is, again, maybe some of it stems from biblical stuff, or maybe it's just a defense mechanism that we to make ourselves feel better as humans. I don't know. It's a lot. It's complex. But this idea that humans are here and animals are here. And then on top of that, the belief that therefore we can do whatever we want to them, that might equals right just because we can. How about if we're here, even if we believe animals are not that they're lesser than us, but they have less abilities than us, they have a different type of intelligence, therefore they need help functioning in this complicated world. Wouldn't we say, let's be their stewards? Why don't we use that same energy of directing towards these more helpless, more vulnerable beings? Why do we choose to destroy them instead of being their stewards? We could just flip it to channel that same energy into, maybe we're here to be their protectors then, since the way the world is set up, it's not set up for animals. This world is not set up for animals to live independently of us, live on their own. We can't. We've taken over. Humans have completely taken over every corner of this entire world, except for some patches, practically, where they're still wild and it's still untamed and it's still it's not built up in that way. So now we owe it. We have to. We put the animals in this position. So it's different now. We domesticated. So, all the farm animals are domesticated, right? They're touched by human hands from day friggin' one. And so, yeah. So, again, from the spiritual perspective, I say that let's flip it. Let's not only think that animals are equal to us on a spiritual level, on a soul level, they are absolute equals to us, different but equal. But how about they know more than us? Like, consider that for a moment. On a spiritual level, think maybe they got it going on spiritually more than we do. Maybe they're more evolved. If we stop judging for a moment and stop looking at bodies with 4 legs or 2 legs, feathers or skin, and think, well, maybe they are already very present, very evolved, very, and maybe they are our teachers. Maybe that's part of, they have a purpose, spiritual purpose all their own. Maybe part of that is in some way that we're the students. It would certainly make sense. We seem to not know what the heck we're doing. We're destroying the planet. We're hurting each other.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
They're taking only what they need. They're not burning or murdering or doing all the things that we're doing and destroying the environment, like you're saying. I'm looking at the squirrels outside. They're interacting with the birds and the chipmunks. Everyone, all of them are getting along. They're taking what they need. And if we could follow that, if we only took what we needed, and if we respected the earth, we wouldn't be in this big mess we're in today, where we're about to lose our earth. And so, yeah, you're right. They are the teachers. We're just too arrogant to see.
Yeah. Yeah, we just if we put ourselves in their shoes, for a moment, we would start to see that. And people will say this is extreme, like this conversation we're having is extreme. Are you crazy? That's never going to happen. There's no utopia. There's no way. Well, how about we just let all the animals loose? And, we're not saying that. We're saying first we need to start with opening our awareness and having breakthrough thinking and radical thinking around this. And then we can start to maybe to put things in place. But really, looking at it from the animal's perspective is the only way for that to happen. That empathy that we seem to have lost, even for ants, like you're saying, bugs are animals. And in terms of volumes of animals that are killed daily, bugs are at the top of the list, volume, like amount wise, right? Because there are it's a number that's something like quadrillions, something like that. That's how many bugs there are in the world, something like that. You can look it up, some number we can't even begin to fathom. And most of those bugs are fine, and they have their own little societies. They're the same. They have their own little world. The bees, they create things, they do things, they have purpose. The ants, if you ever watch an ant, it moves with purpose, man. It's picking stuff up, it's building this, it's digging a hole, it's going home, it's taking care of the other ants, right? And then the example, if we were the ants, but what if, I hear vegans do outreach with that example and people just like shake their heads, but what if alien beings, it's just an example. What if beings from another planet invaded our planet, and they're bigger than us, and they're more powerful than us, and they're even smarter than us, and they eat us. They eat humans, or they step on them the way we step on ants. What if that happened? The tables could turn. So for us to, really think that this is the way it is and the only way that it is, and humans have a right to this, and we're better, and elitism, and I think it denies, it's a lot of denial, and I think it will catch up to us. It is catching up to us. I think our treatment of animals shows up every day in different ways, and they say that the slaughterhouse workers who enact trauma on the animals, and that's what they have to do for a living, or they feel they have to do that for a living, they go home, and how can you not bring that home? In some way, either internalizing it or externalizing. But it's so much more. There's even so much more to it than that.
You're right. And that's what Dr. Will Tuttle was talking about. So that's the unity. A true spiritual practice. I've never seen someone so connected to every living thing when he was talking about the slaughterhouse workers as being a part of us, right? They are a part of, when we start to see them as something else, how can we see them as something else? That these slaughterhouse workers are part of this bigger picture that are hurt, which affects us. When we hurt someone, it comes back to us, but we're so blind to that. And we don't see it.
We don't see it. Victims, we're all sort of caught up in this systemic issue that is so big, and people are victims in many different ways, and certainly, but the animals are the main victims. We are secondary. People are definitely can be secondary victims and have secondary trauma, but the animals are the one getting the firsthand worst of it trauma. We can't, it's unimaginable. It's really unimaginable. But at the same time, if we could fix that, change that, then all the other subsets of that, everything related to that could begin to change, And I think a lot of it is that we're in a crisis of empathy, that maybe empathy could equate to spirituality. So we could say it's a crisis of disconnect, from our spiritual self, and that empathy is missing from our core beliefs and from our actions, that we're talking a lot about love and peace and happiness and joy. And a lot of it is just talk, a lot of it, it doesn't translate into our choices and into our actions.
Right. And so what if somebody's watching and then they don't have a spiritual practice, but they would like to have one? What would you suggest as a first step? It's like, here I am sitting here thinking, what does that even mean? What would be the way to go about it?
Well, if someone wants to get started, kind of branch off and find their groove, find their path for themselves, I guess first and foremost, follow what you're curious about. Follow your natural curiosity, because often our curiosity is more than curiosity. It's a tug, it's a pull. It's like a magnet towards something, and that will be a starting place. So whether it's a spiritual path or a religious path or whatever it is, or maybe some of the books we might recommend or some of the people we might recommend to follow, like Will Tuttle or Earthling Ed talks about the ethics of veganism, or, Melanie Joy or Claire Mann and people like that, but they're not necessarily spiritual. So, I guess first maybe do your own inner work with finding as much as you can some peace within yourself, maybe through a meditation practice with the intent that you're going to connect with something greater than yourself or something, more than yourself. And then just maybe journal some of these good, powerful questions, and know that there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. But here's the questions that I invite your viewers maybe to do some self-reflection on. I have wrote them down. One is, do animals have a soul? Again, no right or wrong. Just let people start to reflect on that for themselves, what they believe currently and what they might begin to believe. Are they a soul? Do they have a soul, or are they a soul? Are they aware of themselves as a soul, right? Do animals know God, if you say God, or universe? Do they have a sense that there is that? Do they remember God, right? Just like us, we feel like we have a memory of God and then we came into the physical. Are they communicating with God? Are animals communicating with the universe? Do they have a relationship that we're not even privy to, right? Are they physical expressions of the universe, of God? Are animals aware of the interconnectedness between all species? How do species relate to other species on a spiritual level? Like, what's that feel like for them? We have to just we have to play with that idea, because we don't know for sure. We see lots of interspecies interactions, but I think it goes even beyond that, and how do animals express that interconnectedness? Are they doing it? Are we missing it? We're seeing that, but we're missing it. Are they trying to connect with us on a spiritual level and we're missing that? What about the afterlife? Because often, our beliefs about an afterlife are tied into our spiritual beliefs or our religious beliefs. What about animals? Don't listen to anybody else, it's an opinion. Everybody else, what they offer is opinion, but see what feels. Is there an afterlife, the same experience, different experience for animals? Do they remember the afterlife? Do they remember what I believe is sort of this life between lives? Because I believe in some level we reincarnate. Do you believe animals reincarnate, or they don't? Do you believe animals can reincarnate into humans? Humans can reincarnate into animals? I have my beliefs about that, but this is something to explore. Where do animals go? Do animals choose to be here? Do animals have free will? Okay. Do animals have particular life lessons to learn? Or are they here mainly to teach us? And if so, what is it that we can and might learn from animals in a big life lesson way? And that's a good starting point, I think. If you want to start a spiritual practice, you got to be open-minded. You can't come to a new spiritual practice with the old stuff. You have to be willing to at least put it aside to then explore and really. That's why we're born with a conscience. That's our soul's language. Our conscience is the language of our soul, I would say.
Yes, definitely. And I love these questions really help open up new insight. And I think what you talked about, having empathy for others and having empathy for yourself when you're looking at and doing this exploration process. Like you said,
don't judge yourself around your answers or lack of answers. That would negate the point of it.
Right. Yeah. This is all exploration. And that's so funny, because that brings me back to what those evangelicals were saying to me. What if all your thoughts were broadcast on TV? And I said, well, I'm a human being.
Okay with it.
Broadcast them away. Everyone has thoughts, right? That are not nice and that are ugly, but those are thoughts. What's more important is, like, could I forgive myself for that thought, or did I carry that thought out, right? So it was very interesting that they kept saying that to me. I have a pamphlet on it. What if everybody saw your thoughts?
I guess I want to hear them answer that question, because I'm not even sure what they're shooting for. I'm not sure what they think they will hear from us with that question. And obviously, it's a leading question.
Right.
It's some kind of, they're trying to prove some point, which might not happen for us, because we're already aware not only of our thoughts, but we're trying to line up our actions with our beliefs. We're trying, at least vegans I know.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, I mean, to me, that's very much more enlightened because that's connection to all. So, but I'm not judging anyone that hasn't made that connection. It took me a long time to make the connection, and then everyone has their own journeys that, you know, their own, just that all those beliefs. I mean, some people really had it, those beliefs really ingrained more than others. So it depends on your parents who brought you up, right? Maybe some people messed up, some were brought up not eating much meat, but then there are others that were just drilled into them. You have to have meat. So, you know, this person, it's easier for them. It's not that this person's bad or, you know, it's about what
Yeah.
their journey was first.
We're to some degree, we're all products of our upbringing. Of course, we can't help it. We come in not like a lump of clay to be molded, not completely. We come in, I believe, already having sort of a blueprint within us. We are souls, and we don't lose anything, you know. But at the same time, we do adopt and take on and model, mirror and model, you know, through our upbringing. But that doesn't mean we don't want to use that as an excuse either, or we don't want to declare that a block or a barrier, because every single human has the exact same capability to have an aha moment, to have a moment where it really dawns on them. And if you ask any vegan, they'll tell you their vegan story. And usually sometimes it's that. There may be one moment or a series of moments, you know, so that's, I mean, that's possible for any or all of us,
Right.
you know. Sometimes it does take a willingness to let go of your ego, or let go of pride, or let go of being right, or just being able to say, oops, I regret, I made a mistake. Okay, but I'm going to turn now, and I'm going to make up for that, because we can't make it up to animals. Everything we've done, you know, we can't change it now. We can't make up. What we can do is go forward. We can ask for animals' forgiveness. You know, I always say to people, like, what if you met every animal you ate on the other side? What if they all lined up and one at a time, they need to have a conversation with you? You know, they're going to let you know what that was like for them. And then you can't, on the other side, avoid your pain. You go through it because of that empathy and because of that connection. You know, but what do we need? We don't need to die first for that to happen, if that does happen. I don't know for sure, but, you know, let's act as if, let's live every day as if our actions really do matter and count, and they echo out into eternity. And knowing that we are affecting others, human and non-human others, are all affected by every single everything. There's nothing that exists in a vacuum or in a void. This conversation we're having, it's going out there. It's a signal. It's going out. It's broadcasting, like they say, you know. And what I'm going to go do later, it's broadcasted. If I go do activism, that's broadcasted. If I'm fighting for the animal, that's broadcasted. But if I'm also doing something hurtful, right? Everything has an equal and opposite, sometimes a ripple. So change your ripple. Be mindful of your ripple in the world.
Yes. And for those that are ready to receive the message, I'm excited for y'all, right? And the ones that might receive it tomorrow, I'm excited too. So yeah, and that's one thing that in my spiritual practice I've had to learn is patience, right? And just praying is very. I mean, it doesn't have to be to God. Pray could be for whatever it is to anyone. I don't want to insult anybody here, because whatever that is to you, right? It's always nice to thank the universe, thank the trees, thanks for being there, right? That's spiritual practice. So it doesn't have to be any more than that.
Absolutely, because again, everything is energy, everything is spirit. And the Native Americans and from shamanic traditions, they absolutely talk about that everything is living spirit, like the trees and every blade of grass. And it just depends when you really think of it that way. I mean, animals we know for sure are sentient. Plants aren't necessarily sentient in the human, through the human lens, but that doesn't mean that plants don't have they have an aliveness, of course. You know, that it's all part of the composite and the dance of energy, moving and grooving and shaping and unshaping and forming and unforming and manifesting and unfasting. That that essence of energy, which is limitless, really, really limitless in that way, So, I invite people to just sort of look at it through that higher spiritual lens and then ask themselves, is this something I want to see come back to me? Is this something I want to put out in the world? Is this really me? Is this choice really aligned with me? Can I do a little better without judgment from this? Will this cause pain? Directly or indirectly, it's easy for us to say when we don't see the pain happening to the animals, it's easy for us to compartmentalize it and deny, but it's happening because you go out and buy something tomorrow, whether it has, so many things have animal in them. They're tiny little, even gelatin, which is in so many things. So, yeah, so that I would invite everybody to include animals in their spirituality and in their spiritual practice if you really want to broaden your mind and extend it out. Extend the compassion, please. Extend your compassion beyond your loving, beloved companion animals. Please, please extend the compassion to all species of animals. They're here with us, not for us.
Right, with us, not for us. Exactly. And that includes ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
the compassion, yes, to all living beings. So, yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. If you're enjoying it, please hit subscribe. And Michele, do you have any final words you'd like to leave us with? Let us know also where we can get a hold of you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation and certainly would love feedback. People can reach me at my website, which I think you can see right here, michelegranberg.com. And on the website, you can see a little bit of some of the things I do, both with veganism and with spirituality, because I teach meditation and I do hypnotherapy and past life regression and energy healing. I also do pet loss bereavement sessions, and I can do everything remotely and in person. And and Go Vegan coaching. I also do, helping people make the transition into veganism for the animals. And I also am part of a group that helps to mentor fledgling activists. It's called Animal Activism Mentorship. And our mission with AAM is to pair up on a one-on-one basis experienced activists with less experienced activists who want to get more involved and don't know where to start. And we take them under our wing and we help them to get more involved in activism. So hopefully they'll be active and be more effective, and we'll help the animals and grow our activism community. So you can look up Animal Activism Mentorship.com for more information about that. And I don't know, everybody should go out and volunteer at a farm animal sanctuary near you. That's a good place to start. Right from here, just make sure it's a vegan one. Make sure if you can contact me if you're not sure how to tell. There are some telltale signs of whether they're vegan or not vegan. Go to a vegan one. Yeah. So I hope that those are some actions. Act.
Amen to that. Act, and really tune into this lovely connection to the universe. Take baby steps if you need to. I'm really grateful for all of you all because we're all connected. So, yes, definitely. And thanks everyone for watching. And thanks, Michele, for all your wisdom.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's say namaste vegan, y'all, and we will see you later. Bye, everybody.